The Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by these great sponsors. Are you looking to value your equipment more accurately, target the right buyers and close more deals, reach your ideal customer? Then look no further. Fusable isn't just about ag data, it's about action. Our best-in-class solution empowers you to value your equipment accurately, make informed decisions, and find the perfect prospects. Ignite your dealership's growth at fusable.com/movingiron-podcast. Out in the field, every decision counts. You wouldn't plant without testing your soil, so why would you prospect blind? Introducing EDA, your one-stop shop for ag equipment intel. EDA goes beyond specs and prices. You get deep dive data on every piece of equipment like UCC filings that help track ownership changes and uncover potential sales leads. D&B firmographics, which help you understand the financial health and buying power of potential customers. Market trends that help you stay ahead of the curve, and insights on equipment demands and pricings. With EDA, you're not just looking at data, you're seeing opportunity. Find the right buyer, sell smarter, and build lasting relationships. Visit edadata.com for your free demo and unlock the power of knowledge. For over 80 years, Iron Solutions has been your go-to data source for ag dealers, lenders, and manufacturers. Get powerful appraisal and value forecasting tools that fuel profitable decisions anytime, anywhere. Get your free demo at ironsolutions.com. Iron Solutions, confidence in every click. Today, there are many ways to finance ag equipment, but nobody delivers simple, fast, or flexible financing like AgDirect. Learn more about your options to buy, lease, and refinance equipment at agdirect.com. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours.
When you partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
At Big Iron Auctions, customer satisfaction is our #1 goal. As the 40-year leader in auctions for agriculture, real estate, livestock, construction, and transportation, we are here to serve you. Big Iron will handle everything from start to finish. From meeting with you, to prepping your equipment, writing the listings, and collecting buyer's payments, let us do the heavy lifting for you. We love our customers, and we treat them like family. There's a Big Iron sales rep in your area, so let's get together. To learn more, visit bigiron.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving iron.
Hello, and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Seymour and Sean Hackett. Sean Hackett is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida. He's nice enough to come on and talk about what's happening in the world of commodities. Sean, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good, Casey. Always glad to be on your show.
Glad to have you, man. A few things to talk about. I think first we should start with the geopolitical thing. We saw fire up as a kind of an ongoing response to the October 7th Israeli Hamas attacks. And they decided to broaden that out and take out a few other terrorist groups along the way. And in the middle of that, Iran decided to jump in because obviously Iran was not funding anybody at all. And then all of a sudden they found a few IRGC members in the bottom of these rubble piles that
Israel made it. So Israel had some attacks from Iran, and it kind of heightened a few things in the Middle East, Sean. So I guess as you're looking at the situation there, your thoughts on how this geopolitical situation might affect what we see happening in the marketplace.
Well, I mean, certainly we've been building this geopolitical tension for a long time, and it's just starting to get out of hand. Nobody wants peace. Everybody wants to keep pressing, and it looks to me like, as you said, we're on the verge of a significant escalation, and of course, what you worry about is disruption of supply, disruption of crude oil supply, disruption of natural gas supply, disruption of wheat supply, disruption of these key commodities that funds and fuels the global economy being disrupted or significantly curtailed. I mean, we already went through a mini round of that, back in 22 when the initial invasion of Ukraine took place, and we had wheat go up to something like whatever it was, $13-14, and crude oil was 130. It's possible that we might be going down that road again, and if it turns into a global war, then it impacts all commodities, not just the commodities that are involved in that area. So there's a delineation between a regional conflict, which is what we've had up to this point, and when it becomes a global war. Because if it's a global war, then everything becomes scarce. If it's just a regional war, it's things like energy and food, like wheat, that become an issue. And so we'll just have to see if calmer heads can come together, or whether nobody has any interest in that. So far, it does not look like there's been a whole lot of peace. Those offering peace out there, everyone seems to want to, put everyone's children at risk of war and dying, and that seems to be where the leaders want to go. And I sure would hope that we could make a better decision than that, but I'm not one in control. So
it's a weird scenario where some people can't wait to see this happen. It's quite scary. So anyway, let's jump over and talk about what we see happening here. We had Hurricane Helene roll through, stayed significantly east of where they thought it was going to go. We've seen some catastrophic flooding from that in the Appalachian Mountains areas of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. It made its way up into Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, in that area where it kind of settled out. And we've seen the price of corn this week have a really good run. I think we put almost 25 cents or something like that on it this week so far. So, Sean, as you're looking at these two scenarios we see here, any real effect from the harvest situation that we see from any complications from Helene in the corn marketplace, and then some of the factors you talked about this 2 weeks ago that you felt like corn was ready to take off and run, and I think you hit that right on that nail on the head there. So I guess, Sean, as you're looking at this, what are some of the situations you see here?
Yeah, I think for corn situation, the rally is not really based upon the storm. The rally is just based upon recognition of increasingly strong exports out of the U.S. Because of a short Brazil crop last year, because of a short Russia-Ukraine crop this year, because of a short corn crop in the EU this year. You put that on with geopolitics, which still has a factor with corn. And you look at the quarterly grain stocks numbers that came out showing less corn than everybody thought for the second time in a row. Remember, we talked about how they'd keep lowering those old crop stocks from what was expected. I mean, we're now coming under 2 billion bushel carryout. This is what we spoke about on your show a few months back, that we were heading towards more like a 1.8 billion bushel carryout to 2 billion bushel carryout versus a 2.2 billion bushel carryout. And that the difference between those two scenarios is the difference between 380 corn and 450 corn. And so what I think the market is correctly doing is it's recognizing that we traded too much supply on the spreadsheets that didn't actually exist. And now we have to actually trade what's true. And what's true is still enough supply, but not as much. And we're at 430 something today on the December contract. And it looks to me like we're doing exactly what we discussed, that we're repricing the corn market more around 4.5 until we can get a better handle on exactly what's going to happen in South America, Brazil, Argentina. Both regions are in seeing very, very poor weather conditions right now, especially Brazil. And it looks to me like we could have the most delayed planting season ever seen for soybeans, which means that the corn crop will get in the ground even later, which means even less corn acres, which means even less corn yields, just like we saw last year, but worse. So when you really look at it, Casey, this has the making of two poor corn crops back to back and two poor soybean crops back to back. We haven't seen 2 bad years in a row for both crops like this in Brazil in 50 years. And so when you put that together, you have a situation where your number one exporter in the world is not going to be available, and we are not likely going to have another crop like this next year. We can talk about why and some of this drying out may be an early sign of it, but the likelihood is that next growing season we're going to have much more challenging conditions in the U.S. and our crops are going to be considerably smaller than they are today at a time that Brazil does not have the exports to sell. And looking at the Russia-Ukraine situation, Casey, the worst planting season for winter wheat seen in 50 years. And the runway is running out. It's already run out in Volga, by the way. They can't plant anymore there. And it's running out within the next 1 to 2 weeks elsewhere, which means abandonment of acres. I mean, planted acres way down. The acres that did get planted in the dust in terrible conditions. I mean, they had their crop last year was down 15%. We could be down 10 or 15% from the lower crop this year to next year. I mean, that's how bad this looks to me. And on top of it, we're having an unbelievable dry weather here in the U.S. all of a sudden.
Yep.
As we're trying to get the winter wheat crop planted. So far, it's been okay, but I mean, we might have a very poor finish to the planting of winter wheat, and it doesn't look like there's any rain for the foreseeable. Meaning, there's not going to be any rain for the rest of the planting season. So not ideal, Casey. Not ideal at all. And so you throw out all that together with the elections coming up, the political chaos that's to come, the geopolitical chaos that's going on in the Middle East, and monetary policy from China. They shot a bazooka last week where they printed tons of money, handing money out to the Chinese consumers like we did during 2020 to get people to buy. I mean, their stock market has surged 25% in like 3-4 days on this. They've told the world they are going to print whatever it takes to get things going again. And that is incredibly constructive for commodities, especially those commodities that they purchase a lot, because they're going to see better purchases and better demand in the next 12 months than we saw in the last 12 months. So things like cotton, things like soybeans, that they buy a lot of, they're going to be looking for product at a time that it looks to me, like Brazil is going to be offline to a certain extent, and Russia, Ukraine is going to be offline to a certain extent, and Europe is going to be offline to a certain extent. And we have some supply, but there's going to be a point where we're going to sell what we want to, and then we're going to put the rest in the bin with a lock and key, and we're going to say, "Come get it next summer when things look really, really bad here." And that's the way I see it. So
yeah. All right, so let's piece that together here. I've talked to 2 or 3 people, eastern Nebraska, western Wyoming, or western Iowa, sorry, in that area, and all of them have said not only was, when I talked to them in August, it was the driest August they ever had, and now I've talked to them in September, and it was the driest September they ever had. You've talked about the Gleisberg cycle and those kind of things, and before we started recording, you were kind of breaking that down. Go over that a little bit, Sean, and what you see, this dryness, and maybe a precursor to the Gleisberg cycle.
What people need to understand about the Gleisberg cycle, it's a 10-year period where we peak, where the sea surface temperatures of our oceans peak in temperature. Listen, I want to define it that way. Okay, it's it has to do with how the planets spin and move around in their own different orbits and speeds and cycles. They all have different magnetic field strengths. They all have different gravimetric strengths. And as they move around, they impact their forces on the sun and the moon's gravimetric forces on our oceans. There are times when those forces are putting what's called downwelling forces on our oceans. Downwelling means you're keeping the warm surface temperatures of the oceans onto the surface, and it keeps getting warmer. It's the warming cycle for the sea surface temperature cycle. Then we get into a phase where we get an upwelling period. These periods, by the way, last between 40 and 60 years before they switch. But then we get an upwelling period where those oceans then cool. The Gleisberg cycle is when these planetary arrangements impacting the sun and the moon are in such a position that they're creating maximum downwelling, and they're creating the maximum heat for sea surface temperatures. And what does that mean? When you have warm sea surface temperatures, it creates hot air above it. What does hot air do? It rises. We know this. Cold air sinks. So if you have maximum heat of the sea surface temperatures and you're getting rising air, means for the most part, the entire oceans are creating this upwelling of hot air. It's creating these extreme high pressure systems. These extreme high pressure systems is where you get extreme heat and drought from. And they tend to, once they set up, they get stuck in that zone and they become stagnant. But remember, the Earth is a self-correcting mechanism. Climate is if you have a very strong high pressure system here, you're going to have equal and opposite reaction of a strong low pressure system to equilibrate those forces. And you're going to get record flooding elsewhere. We've talked about this: heat, cold, floods, drought. It's two extremes working side by side. We have seen that happen repeatedly over the last 3 to 4 years. We've had places that can't buy a drop of rain and places that can't get it to stop raining. Last year, southern Brazil, record rainfall of all time. Northern Brazil, prior to this year, the driest of all time. We had the record rainfall in northern Iowa and in Minnesota earlier this year. Now we can't buy a drop of rain. So these are the cycles that the Gleisberg cycle generates. And so if you really think this through, we had the 1 in 100-year drought in Europe 3 years ago. We had the 1 in 100-year drought in Argentina 2 years ago. We had what we thought was a 1 in 50-year drought in Brazil last year. Now we have the 1 in 100-year drought this year. So we're developing this Gleisberg cycle over this decade period of extremely hot temperatures, extremely dry areas that get stagnant, and it rotates. In the way the Gleisberg cycle historically operates is that every 89 years, plus or minus a year, this upper airflow pattern finds its way into the Midwest of the United States. That year, the ideal year for the Gleisberg cycle to take place is 2025. It could have been 24, it could have been early, and it could be 26, but the ideal statistical year is 2025. Typically, you see signs of the Gleisberg cycle coming well in advance. It's not like it just springs up on you. Okay. The problem with the last 2 years is we went from La Nina to El Nino, a thrashing of the atmosphere. And it's hard sometimes to keep the atmosphere stagnant because it's changing. And then we went from El Nino to La Nina. Once again, it doesn't mean it can't do it. It just means it's harder to do it. It's better to have a stable state ENSO, or what I call a steady state central sea surface temperature of the Pacific. Right now, we're in a steady, neutral, negative to weak La Nina state, and that is expected to, our work says that's expected to remain in place well through next summer, and it could even continue through the following summer, a steady state. We're not going to see this big change in the atmosphere in this next crop cycle, which means that we have the ability this crop cycle to develop a pattern, and it's just going to stay. It's going to set, and it's going to stay. And we know neutral, negative to La Nina is how you get droughts in the middle of the country. In June, 23% of the country was in some type of a drought. That's near an historic low. Today, 75% of the country is in some sort of a drought, Casey. It's one of the greatest swings from least amount of drought to most amount of drought on a contiguous U.S. basis we have ever seen. It's unbelievable that we went through such a dramatic shift from wet to dry in a matter of a few months. My view, and the view of looking at 1936, 1934, and looking at past Gleisberg cycle 1 in 100 year droughts in the Midwest, you typically see these droughts develop in the fall, and then they exacerbate as we get into the spring and summer. So the fact that we've had this dramatic drying out of sea surface of the U.S. in just a short period of time tells me this is a sign, that we're looking at the Gleisberg cycle potentially developing for 2025. It's what you would expect to see, Casey, if 25 is going to be that kind of a Dust Bowl year.
So I went out and pulled up, I don't know if you can see my screen right here, but I went out and pulled up the drought map where we're at today. And I was watching a U.S. Farm Report or something, Farm Progress, something. I was in on one of their websites. And anyway, and they were talking about the number of states that were in, like what percentage of the state was in some level of drought. And if you can take a look here, there's not a state, with the exception of Florida, I guess, there's not a state out there that doesn't have some level of drought in it right now, from either it's a level 1 all the way to a level 3 or 4, or however high it goes. There's a significant amount of drought right now that this summer, late summer, early spring, early summer, sorry. It looked like this, and we had all that rain come through, and it kind of cleared things out. But to your point, when that happened back then, you were saying, like, that's great. The issue we have is the subsurface soil moisture degree of moisture that we see out there. And when you have a rain event come through, the topsoil gets that, but it's got to get down into the actual subsoil. And I think that's some of the reflectiveness that we see here in this, is that we just don't have the subsoil moisture out there that we've seen in the past. And we get these rains that comes through, and then because of the subsoil issue that we see, we get immediately goes back to this as soon as it gets dry again.
Yeah, and the point I really it's how fast this has happened, Casey. I mean, we've never seen it really quite. I think it's unprecedented to see this kind of a change in
it dries out quick.
23% to 75% of the country in drought in just a few months. Just to remind everybody how bad it is in Brazil, this map is wet compared to them. They're looking at black colors, maroon black colors. I mean, that's what the most of Brazil is looking at. So what you just showed looks pretty bad, but compared to Brazil, what we have is wet. So yeah, I mean, and you know what, Casey, because the La Nina arrived a little later than it could have, we just missed getting it we just missed it in July. It was a close, the last couple of years, remember 2 years ago, May and June was the driest on record, and then we just got the rains in time as El Nino arrived. This year, the rains came on, and they left just after, we dodged 2 bullets by the skin of our chin the last 2 years because of the rapidly changing atmosphere. This coming season, we're not going to have the luxury of a changing atmosphere to change a stagnant pattern. And usually what sets up in the fall isn't going to change. And from what I can see, the next couple of months, Casey, there's really no change in this pattern. River levels are already back to dangerously low levels down the Mississippi again. So yeah, this is definitely there's check boxes we like to check boxes we go along, saying yes, no, yes. This is what we would want. I don't want to see this, but this is what we would be looking for to say that, are we on some kind of trajectory to a Gleisberg cycle 1 in 1 year drought for next year? And the answer is absolutely yes. Interesting enough, Casey, I did a little more homework and found this, that in 1936, which was by most definitions the peak of the Dust Bowl of the last Gleisberg cycle, at that time Brazil had their worst drought in history in 1936. The growing season leading into our 1936. So they had their worst drought ever, and then we had our worst drought ever. Obviously, Brazil is in a serious drought. The drought they're having now is far, far worse than it was back then because of deforestation of the Amazon and other reasons. But there is something to the Gleisberg cycle that it tends to impact areas, and I find it interesting that the last time we really had this, Brazil had a terrible drought, and then that led to a teleconnection to our crop season, the following season having a terrible drought. Obviously, not enough data points to say for sure, but we're always looking for causal effects. And I just found it's hard to get reliable data down there, but I did find some extremely reliable data that showed that they did have a tremendous drought in 1930, 1935, 1936, leading to our drought. So something to keep in mind, that the atmosphere is acting aberrant. Sea surface temperatures are at a record high, as you would expect with the Gleisberg cycle. And Tonga, although Tonga is starting to lose its water vapor in the atmosphere, is still going to be impacting heat for the next 1 to 2 years. Already, Brazil 105 degrees, breaking record highs for the second year in a row. Casey, they've broken record highs in Brazil. Yep. And there's your black maroon. I mean, it makes our drought situation look like a walk in the park.
So yeah, to your point, comparatively, this is the world drought map. So South America, Brazil area right here, and then the Americas, North America's up here. Significantly different in the color. That's the
Brazil.
there.
If you look at the colors in 1936, Casey, it was what Brazil has. It was more almost black. The subsoil moisture was that depleted, and that's just not like that's just not on the surface. That's going down 1 meter. It's like that.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing. And if these rains that are forecasted to come in to Brazil in the middle part of October, which I don't believe are going to be particularly, I don't think they're going to be anything more than minor. But if they're not soakers, Casey, if they just sort of spread some, half inch or an inch, but that's all we get, and we go back to a drier, hotter pattern in November, as I think we're going to do, that's where things get really, really interesting, because it's one thing to delay planting. It's one thing to tell the Brazilians you can't plant 4% more soybean acres this year. Just plant what you planted last year. It's another thing to continue that process into the yield formation phase, which is really November into early December. And if it starts to look like their yields are going to be way off, now you have a major crop problem, which quite frankly really has never happened in Brazil. They've never had a major crop problem. Right. They just haven't had it. I mean, their idea of a crop problem is a crop down 3 to 5% like last year's crop was. It's just not down more than that. They could have, corn could be down 20% plus, but we've never seen a major crop problem in Brazil in soybeans, and in modern day times. It's possible this year could be soybean production could be down. It could be down, 10, 15, 20% if those yields come up short and they don't plant more acres. Then it's just a function of how much are those yields down on an aggregate basis. It's a wild situation. Obviously, lots still to come on weather, and things could still get bailed out. But for the most part, this is unprecedented, and grains are acting rationally, which is putting some weather premium on. What I will say in the end, while everyone was panicking in January while everyone was panicking in July and August, ridiculous numbers like $3 corn and $8 soybeans, and panic selling. Got to get out. You got to do this. All these things. Instead of following the herd and selling into that, that kind of hole, why don't you sell rallies into overhead resistance? We had one of those opportunities in May that we took full advantage of. And now, we've put on almost 50 cents on the corn market. We've put on $1 on the soybean market. And we've put on almost 80 cents to $1 on the wheat market from just 30 to 45 days ago. Now, while I believe that prices can certainly still hit higher over the longer term, if you're a farmer that needs to get something done here, Casey, it is a heck of a lot better to sell into strength. $4.50 corn is overhead resistance. $11 soybeans is overhead resistance. $6.50 wheat is overhead resistance. Why not sell into strength instead of panic selling into a consensus herd hole that existed in January that I know a lot of farmers sold and they printed the low? I would recommend that producers should be scaling in sales in all three markets into those overhead resistance targets until they've gotten themselves where they need to be and they've gotten things done. Because look, short term, there's a lot of volatility, Casey. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's going to be another correction in grains. We're going to have a correction in grains. It's not going to be straight up. Try to get in the habit of selling rallies into overhead resistance, pieces of your crop along the way. Try to avoid
where we are and how fast things are going.
Try to avoid getting caught selling into, a herd mentality like we had in July and August, and like we had in February, March. If you recall how horrendous everybody was about running around saying we'll never have another rally in grains ever again. Try to not fall into that prey. Try to take advantage when getting is good. We've had big rallies. You should be making some sales if you're not where you need to be.
Right on. Well, like you said, at the beginning of the time, there's a lot of things moving, a lot of things happening, a lot of different directions things could go. Need to be paying attention to what's going on.
And most important, Casey, the farm economy, the way I'm seeing this, is going to be much better than people are thinking. Because at least the U.S. has good crops. Nobody else does. But the U.S. has a good crop.
Yep.
So we have a lot to sell. And if we're going to get, $4.50 to $5 corn, and we're going to get $11 to $12 soybeans, and we're going to get $6.5 to $7 wheat, like we're almost at now, with the kind of yields and production we just had, that actually works. The farmers are profitable. They're not losing money. And so all this doom and gloom and the farm income crashing and how are farmers going to make it and the law, it actually won't even exist unless farmers sold the lows. If they did sell the lows, then I don't know, then they're in trouble. But if they didn't sell into panic lows, as we avoided or tried to suggest not to do, I actually think the farm economy is going to be, it's not going to be booming, but it's not going to be in a depression either. I'm much more optimistic that at least the U.S. farm economy is looking at a much better overall farm income year than the dire forecasts that have been out there for months trying to scare everybody into oblivion.
Yep, for sure. All right, Sean, good stuff as usual. Folks want to reach out to you, get more information about what you're doing at Hackett Financial. What's the best way to do that?
We have a Twitter page at Faradex11. We have a website, Hackett, Hackett advisors.com, where we put on interviews and some tidbits of our cycles, statistics and correlations of how we look at weather and price forecasting, and to see if what we do and how we do it might be of value to those that listen and watch your show.
Right on, Sean. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast, Sean. We'll catch you again next week.
Sounds good, Casey. Look forward to it.
Right on. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Go to LinkedIn and Moving Iron Podcast, and you can see everything Moving Iron related at Moving Iron Podcast or movingironllc.com. Also go to the YouTube channel, which you can see the video version of this, and that's obviously creatively named the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. Check that out. And then you can go to check out the new version of the podcast Aaron Fennell and I are doing called The Machine Shed. That's everything you need to know about what's going on in the world of agriculture, agricultural equipment anyway. So we have auction reports, we have talk about some construction stuff. We talk about trucks. We talk about what's going on in the world of just overall equipment breakdowns and what that might look like, and do some reviews on some stuff. So the newest one's out there now, so check that out. Moving on, Machine Shed number 2 on the podcast channel, so check it out there. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Sean Hackett. School Smart, folks. Out.
Our podcast is brought to you by these great sponsors. Are you looking to value your equipment more accurately, target the right buyers and close more deals, reach your ideal customer? Then look no further. Fusable isn't just about ag data, it's about action. Our best-in-class solution empowers you to value your equipment accurately, make informed decisions, and find the perfect prospects. Ignite your dealership's growth at fusable.com/movingiron-podcast. Out in the field, every decision counts. You wouldn't plant without testing your soil, so why would you prospect blind? Introducing EDA, your one-stop shop for ag equipment intel. EDA goes beyond specs and prices. You get deep dive data on every piece of equipment, like UCC filings that help track ownership changes and uncover potential sales leads. D&B firmographics, which help you understand the financial health and buying power of potential customers. Market trends that help you stay ahead of the curve, and insights on equipment demands and pricings. With EDA, you're not just looking at data, you're seeing opportunity. Find the right buyer, sell smarter, and build lasting relationships. Visit edadata.com for your free demo and unlock the power of knowledge. For over 80 years, Iron Solutions has been your go-to data source for ag dealers, lenders, and manufacturers. Get powerful appraisal and value forecasting tools that fuel profitable decisions anytime, anywhere. Get your free demo at ironsolutions.com. Iron Solutions, confidence in every click. Today, there are many ways to finance ag equipment, but nobody delivers simple, fast, or flexible financing like AgDirect. Learn more about your options to buy, lease, and refinance equipment at agdirect.com. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. This podcast is proudly provided by Axon, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. Find out more at axontire.com. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron in the 21st century.